The sun had set, and the quiet town of Crescent Springs was bathed in darkness. A car pulled up to the small, decrepit house on the outskirts of town, the headlights casting eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. A man stepped out of the car, his face obscured by the shadows, and walked up to the house, his footsteps echoing through the silent night. He knocked on the door, and after a moment, it creaked open. Inside, a little girl sat on the sofa, her dark hair falling in messy waves around her face. She looked up at the man and smiled, revealing a gap-toothed grin. He smiled back, but there was something unsettling in his eyes that made her uneasy. "Hello there," he said, his voice soft and gentle. "My name is John. Would you like to come with me on an adventure?" The girl hesitated, but John seemed friendly enough. He had a warm smile, and his voice was soothing. She nodded her head, and he took her small hand, leading her out of the house. As they strolled down the quiet street, the girl noticed that they were heading in the opposite direction from the town center. She began to feel nervous, but she didn't say anything. John kept talking to her, telling her about all the incredible things they would see. She tried to concentrate on his words instead of her growing anxiety. They reached a dark alleyway, and John stopped. He turned to the girl and looked at her with an intense gaze that made her feel uncomfortable. "I have a surprise for you," he said, smiling. He pulled out a cloth and covered her nose and mouth. The girl tried to scream, but it was too late. She was already losing consciousness. When the girl woke up, she was in a small, windowless room. It was cold and damp, and the only light came from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. She was lying on a filthy mattress, her hands and feet bound with ropes. John was sitting in a chair across from her, his eyes cold and calculating. He smiled when he saw she was awake. "Welcome to your new home," he said, his voice laced with malice. The girl tried to scream, but her voice was hoarse and barely audible. She struggled against her bonds, but they were too tight. John stood up and walked over to her. He leaned in close, his breath hot on her face. "You're going to be here for a while," he said, his voice low and menacing. "I have a lot of plans for you." Over the next few weeks, the girl endured unspeakable horrors at the hands of John. He tortured her, both physically and mentally, breaking her down until she was a shell of her former self. But the girl didn't give up. She fought back with every ounce of strength she had, determined to survive. And in the end, it was her resilience that saved her. One night when John was asleep, the girl managed to free herself from her bonds. She crept out of the room and ran as fast as she could, not stopping until she reached the safety of the police station. John was eventually caught and brought to justice, but the girl was never the same. She was haunted by the memories of what had happened to her, and she never fully recovered. To this day, people in Crescent Springs still whisper about the horror that took place in that old house on the outskirts of town. And every time they do, the girl shivers, reliving the nightmare all over again.